Imagine giving up everything you've built, your family, your marriage, your home, for a thrill, a spark, a forbidden passion. In the moment, it felt like freedom, like I was finally choosing myself. But the price I'm paying now? It's one I never saw coming. In this video, I'm sharing the raw truth of my biggest regret, the choices that led me here, and the haunting question. Was it all worth it? Stay with me to the end. Because sometimes the pursuit of happiness comes with a cost we're not prepared to face. Hello everyone. I never imagined I'd be sharing this, but today I want to talk about a regret that has lingered within me ever since my divorce. It's a painful story to tell, but maybe someone out there will recognize themselves in it. If you've ever found yourself questioning your decisions, craving freedom, and searching for something more, then this might resonate with you. And perhaps by sharing it, I can help someone else avoid the missteps I made along the way. At the time, I was utterly convinced that leaving my marriage was the only way to find myself again. I felt bound, confined, and as though my ambitions were tangled up in a routine that had long lost its luster. When I got that promotion, it felt like everything was coming together. It was the validation I needed, a spark to ignite my independence, to break free. I could almost taste the freedom, the thrill of a life untethered. But what I didn't realize then, what I was too blind to see, was that I was setting myself up for a whole different kind of prison. A prison made of loneliness, whispers of regret, and nights filled with silence. That first taste of success was intoxicating. It made me believe I was stepping into a version of myself I had always dreamed of. Yet I can't help but wonder now if I was merely escaping shadows I didn't want to face. I thought I'd find happiness outside of my marriage, but all I found was a world that took me further from what truly mattered. Sometimes when I look back, I wonder, what was I really searching for? At the time, I was convinced my husband was holding me back, like he was this weight keeping me from the life I truly wanted. Each day at work, I felt this electric satisfaction that didn't exist at home anymore. I was growing restless, craving recognition, the thrill of pushing my own boundaries without the restraints of family routines. In those early moments, everything seemed so clear, so logical. My new successes at the office felt like personal victories, feeding my determination to reshape my life. With each small win, I thought I was closer to a liberated, independent self. The self I felt I deserved to be. I convinced myself that my husband and the family we had built together were the walls I needed to break down to feel alive again. But now, in the quiet of hindsight, I wonder if my vision was clouded by illusions. I was chasing something intangible, something fleeting. And in the process, I never stopped to see if I was losing things that had been real and steadfast all along. As I settled into my new role, my life slowly began to reshape itself, almost without me noticing. The days filled up with back-to-back meetings, pressing deadlines, and endless projects. My time, once balanced between home and work, was now dominated by this insatiable need to succeed. With each passing week, I was spending more hours away, wrapped up in the energy of my career. At home, he took on more responsibilities with the kids, managing the chaos I was gradually distancing myself from. He handled the bedtime stories, the soccer practices, even the scraped knees and midnight fevers. But instead of feeling grateful, I began to see his devotion as routine, something I deserved, something that was just expected. The warmth I once felt from seeing us work as a team was slowly replaced by a nagging feeling that maybe I was meant for something, or someone, beyond him. I should have recognized his efforts, should have seen how he was trying to hold everything together, to show me that our life still had meaning. But my ambitions had blinded me, filling me with a longing that no longer found solace at home. With each step I took toward my career, a quiet but relentless resentment grew between us. A resentment I nurtured, unable to see how misplaced it was. Soon, every little thing at home began to feel like a challenge, a subtle rebellion against the life I thought I wanted to leave behind. Coming back from the office, I'd find the kitchen in disarray, toys scattered across the floor, or laundry left unfolded. These things, once insignificant, even endearing in their way, now set my nerves on edge. It was as if I were searching for reasons to justify the growing distance between us, turning trivial matters into fuel for my dissatisfaction. He was trying, I could see that. He worked hard to keep the house in order and to be both father and mother when I wasn't there. But it didn't feel like enough, and I could barely hide my frustration. Dinner would be late, the kids rowdy, and I'd let the tension build until even his attempts to soothe me felt like a burden. Another item on the list of things I resented. The home that used to be my sanctuary was becoming a place I avoided, a space that reflected back to me all the doubts I refused to face. I blamed him, blamed the disorder, the routine, convincing myself that he could never understand the demands I carried. Each passing day, the distance between us grew, and I thought it was a necessary sacrifice. As our lives pulled further apart, the thread of connection we once shared began to unravel. I found myself avoiding him, spending longer hours at work or finding any excuse to stay out, relishing the freedom of being away from the quiet reminders of what we once had. Even when he tried to reach out, preparing a warm meal or starting a heartfelt conversation, I could barely bring myself to respond. I was numb to his efforts, almost cold, as if some part of me had already moved on. He started noticing, of course, and the silence between us thickened. Every time he tried to pull me close, I felt as though he were holding me back. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt him, I told myself that countless times. But there was something in me that resisted his presence, as though each reminder of our past weighed me down. I was immersed in my own world, caught up in the pursuit of something new and exciting, something that I convinced myself would make me whole. The comfortable familiarity that once defined us now felt suffocating. What used to be effortless companionship had turned into a tense standoff, neither of us willing to address the obvious fracture between us. I felt a growing sense of inevitability, a certainty that perhaps our paths were meant to diverge. In the midst of this tension, I found myself drawn to a colleague at work. At first, it was innocent, just friendly conversations during coffee breaks, shared laughs over office mishaps, complaints about long hours. But there was a spark there, something that filled a void I hadn't realized was aching inside me. With him, I felt seen in a way that had begun to fade at home. It was exhilarating, even if I told myself I wasn't seeking anything more. Those casual chats soon grew deeper, weaving into shared confessions and late-night messages that left my pulse racing in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. He listened to my frustrations, my dreams, my desire for something beyond the routine. With him, I felt desired, appreciated, alive. It was as if this connection became my secret refuge, a place where I could escape the weight of my choices at home. I told myself it was harmless, that I deserved this sense of joy, of freedom, even as a part of me knew I was inching closer to a boundary I shouldn't cross. But the thrill of this hidden bond, this new spark, had me captured. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone understood my hunger for something more. With every message I exchanged with him, every shared glance and touch, the distance from my husband grew sharper, more unforgiving. I could see him trying to hold on, reaching out to save what remained between us, but his efforts felt hollow to me. The words he once spoke with warmth and conviction now fell flat, almost burdensome, as though my heart had already turned away. I stopped engaging in our late-night conversations, brushed off his attempts to bridge the gap. The small gestures he once offered with love, the simple dinners, the warm goodnight kisses, began to feel like obligations, things I no longer had space for in my life. I found myself finding reasons to stay later at the office, or retreating into the world of social media, where words of encouragement and validation came effortlessly, providing the solace I was missing at home. The screens became my escape, the echo chamber where others fed my conviction that I deserved more. Every like and message of support was a reminder that I was doing the right thing, that I wasn't alone in my dissatisfaction. And yet, beneath the comfort of those affirmations, I could feel a hollow, lingering doubt. But I ignored it, telling myself that I was on the right path, that this was my chance to finally be true to myself, whatever the cost. The day I asked for a divorce felt like the culmination of everything I'd been building toward. With a steady, almost rehearsed resolve, I told him that our marriage was over, that it was time for us to pursue our own happiness. I had prepared myself for his reaction, but nothing could have softened the rawness of seeing the pain in his eyes, the betrayal. He stood there, silent at first, grappling with my words, the life we had built unraveling in a single moment. He pleaded with me, his voice cracking, asking if we couldn't find a way back, if there wasn't something worth saving. He reminded me of our family, of everything we had created together, but I had steeled myself against his pleas. I'd convinced myself that this was my only way to happiness, that I was finally choosing myself. I thought I was prepared for his devastation, but watching him walk away that day left an ache I wasn't ready to face. A part of me felt triumph, a fleeting satisfaction that I had taken control of my life. But as he left, taking a piece of me with him, a cold emptiness began to settle in. It was a silence that would grow deeper than anything I had known, and yet I held fast to my decision, believing that the worst was over. I didn't know then that my journey had only just begun. In the days that followed, I found myself turning to social media as a lifeline, a place where I could drown out the unsettling quiet that had filled my home. I poured my story into posts and comments, looking for validation, some sign that I hadn't made the biggest mistake of my life. Strangers chimed in with their words of encouragement, their reassurances that I had done the right thing, that I deserved to chase my happiness. Each notification, each like, felt like a balm on the rawness of my decision, a way to stave off the creeping loneliness that lurked in the corners of my life. Yet, as comforting as their words were, they felt strangely hollow, as if no amount of virtual validation could truly quiet the doubt gnawing at me. I kept posting, kept reaching out, desperate to believe I hadn't traded everything for nothing. The approval I sought became a daily ritual, a temporary escape. But when the screen dimmed and the house fell silent, that old ache would return, a heaviness that social media couldn't soothe. It was as though I was trying to convince myself as much as everyone else that I'd made the right choice, even as the emptiness grew. In the wake of the divorce, the practical realities of daily life began to settle in, sharp and relentless. I had imagined freedom, a life of ease and lightness, but instead I found myself buried under the weight of tasks I had barely noticed before. Every chore, from cooking to laundry, became a reminder of what I had lost. The home I had once shared now felt overwhelmingly empty, a space that required constant attention just to keep from falling into disarray. At night, the silence was deafening. I'd lie awake, feeling the absence of his presence beside me, haunted by the simplicity of routines I had once taken for granted. There was no one to share the small burdens, the daily struggles that suddenly seemed so endless. The life I thought I'd step into, the independence, the thrill of being on my own, was quickly fading, replaced by a solitude I had never known before. Every task reminded me that I was alone now, and with each passing day, the realization became harder to ignore. The freedom I had chased now felt like a cage of my own making, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had traded one kind of imprisonment for another. One far colder, far lonelier. Over time, I began to notice shifts in the way my children related to me. Where I once felt like their anchor, the one they depended on, I now saw them gravitating more and more toward their father. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that this was simply a phase they'd grow out of, that we would reconnect soon. But as the weeks passed, it became painfully clear that they found with him a stability, a comfort I could no longer provide. I tried to make up for it, filling our time together with gifts and games, eager to spark the joy I feared they'd lost. But I could feel it. Those moments together were fleeting, surface-level attempts to recreate the bond we once had. No toy, no outing could fill the void that had grown between us, and it stung more deeply than I ever could have imagined. When they'd leave to return to his home, I'd watch them go with a heaviness in my chest, feeling the sting of their absence, wondering if I had lost something more than my marriage. I felt like a stranger in their lives, painfully aware that the life I had chosen had created a distance no gift or distraction could bridge. The very people I had hoped would find happiness in my decision seemed to be slipping further away, a consequence I hadn't anticipated but felt in every quiet moment after they left. Eventually, the weight of it all became too much to bear on my own. I decided to try therapy, hoping to find some form of validation, a professional voice to reassure me that I had made the right choice. At first, I went in guarded, almost defensive, eager to defend the decisions that had cost me so much. I wanted to be told that I'd done this for myself, that my search for happiness had been justified. But as our sessions continued, my therapist guided me to reflect on parts of myself I'd carefully avoided. Slowly, the walls I'd built to protect my sense of rightness started to crumble, and I was left facing the truth I had tried so hard to ignore. What I'd thought was a pursuit of freedom and fulfillment was starting to look like an escape from my own unresolved emptiness. With each session, I began to see the damage I had caused, not just to my ex-husband and my children but to myself. The satisfaction I had chased in places outside my marriage was fleeting, a quick fix that left me feeling emptier each time. The hard truths surfaced gradually, painfully, and for the first time, I started to see the part I'd played in creating the life I now found so unbearable. It was a revelation that stung, but it was also the first glimmer of real self-awareness, a hint that maybe, just maybe, I could begin to mend what was broken. Therapy forced me to confront the very flaws I had so skillfully avoided, the ones that had silently fueled my discontent. I came to realize that my frustration with life, my constant need for something more, was not the fault of my ex-husband, nor the routine of family life. It was rooted deep within me, a hunger for validation, a restless desire for perfection that had blurred my vision of what truly mattered. Admitting this truth was like peeling away layers I had spent years hiding behind. The justifications I had clung to, my supposed right to pursue happiness, my claim to independence, began to feel like flimsy defenses for a more profound emptiness I hadn't wanted to face. I saw how I had projected my discontent onto others, creating conflict where there was none, simply because I couldn't sit with my own insecurities. And it hurt to see how my choices had affected not only me but my children, my husband, and the life we had shared. The blame I had placed on them had shielded me from the truth of my own role in the unraveling of our marriage. Each realization came with a sharper clarity, and though it pained me deeply, I began to understand that healing could only start if I took full responsibility for the wounds I had inflicted, on them and on myself. In a moment of vulnerability, I found myself reaching out to him. After all the hours spent unpacking my regrets, examining my mistakes, and facing the ways I had wronged him, I felt a fragile hope stir within me, the hope that maybe we could recover even a small part of what was lost. I rehearsed the words 100 times before finally picking up the phone, my heart pounding as I dialed his number, uncertain if he'd even answer. When we met, I didn't hide behind justifications or try to defend my actions. Instead, I admitted my faults, told him I understood the pain I'd caused. I asked if he would consider giving us another chance, if there was any possibility of rebuilding what I had so thoughtlessly cast aside. Each word felt raw, honest, and exposed, my heart laid bare before him in a way I hadn't been able to before. His eyes were guarded, reflecting a depth of hurt and betrayal that no apology could easily erase. Though he listened, the silence that followed was heavy, a reminder of how deep the wound ran. I saw in his expression that this would not be a quick fix, nor a guaranteed forgiveness. But for the first time, I felt willing to work through the difficult road ahead, willing to prove, if he'd let me, that I could be the partner he once believed in. After a long, agonizing pause, he spoke, his voice tinged with a sadness that cut through me. He thanked me for my honesty, for acknowledging the damage that had been done, but his words were gentle yet firm. There were wounds that ran too deep to be easily mended. He explained, almost apologetically, that while he could appreciate my newfound clarity, the trust we once shared had been fractured, and he wasn't certain it could ever be fully restored. Hearing him say it was like feeling the ground fall away beneath me. I had held on to the hope that an apology and a sincere promise to change could bring us back to each other. But his response was a painful reminder of the permanence of some decisions, of how a single choice can ripple out and change lives forever. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a grief he'd carried long before I'd even noticed the cracks in our marriage. As he turned to leave, a quiet understanding settled over me. This was the consequence of my choices, a reality I would have to live with. I realized then that redemption would be an ongoing journey, not a single act. And while his forgiveness might never come, I owed it to myself to continue growing, even if the road ahead would be one I'd walk alone. With time, regret became my constant companion. Looking back, I could see how I had mistaken temporary satisfaction for true happiness, and how I had sacrificed the things that mattered most on the altar of my own restlessness. I had believed that freedom was worth any price, that the excitement of something new would be enough to fill the voids within me. But the freedom I chased left me isolated, longing for a life I had let slip through my fingers. The life I have now isn't the one I imagined. It's marked by an ache for things I can never reclaim, and a silent reminder of the cost of my choices. There are good days and bad days, moments when I almost feel at peace and others when the loneliness and regret threaten to consume me. Yet with each passing day I try to find a way forward, a way to live meaningfully even with the scars I bear. To anyone who finds themselves questioning their path, I urge you, pause. Look deeply at what you have, at the love, the stability, the simple joys that often go unnoticed. Happiness doesn't always come from grand changes or escapes. Sometimes, it's found in nurturing what's already in front of you. And while pursuing one's dreams is important, it's equally vital to ask yourself what you're willing to risk in the process. Some choices, once made, can't be undone, and some losses are too profound to be filled by anything else. As I bring this story to a close, I can only hope that sharing my journey has shed light on the risks of losing sight of what truly matters. The allure of change, of a different life, can be powerful and tempting. But often the cost is hidden until it's too late. My story isn't unique. It's a reminder that sometimes the deepest contentment lies not in what we lack, but in what we already hold close. So if you're at a crossroads, uncertain or feeling unfulfilled, take a moment to really see the life you've built. Reflect on what could be lost in the pursuit of something new, and remember that the comfort of familiarity, the steady presence of loved ones, is worth cherishing. Often, the desire for escape is fleeting, and the satisfaction we crave is not always found in a different place or person but in nurturing the life we already have. Thank you for allowing me to share this with you. May it encourage you to value what's within your reach, to embrace second chances where they're possible, and to find strength in the connections that hold us together. True fulfillment might be closer than we think. It just takes looking with a heart open to gratitude.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.